Hi, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Teens for Business podcast. I'm your host, Jackie.
I'm Jack.
I'm Kylan.
And I'm Ivan.
Today, we'll be discussing March Madness, college basketball, and the business aspect associated with it. So, I guess just like a quick introduction from everyone here. What do you guys know about college basketball slash March Madness? And are you guys a fan of it?
Yeah, I can start us off. March Madness is a very big tradition in the United States of America, and it's a single elimination tournament between basketball teams uh that represent like a lot of like different like colleges across America. And these colleges obviously have to qualify through their regional tournaments, through their regional conferences, and some of these conferences are more represented in March Madness, such as like the Big Ten with all those big schools like Ohio State and Iowa and other conferences like the Big Sky Conference, which is in the Pacific Northwest, Montana area, have less spots. And I think what makes March Madness so popular is the significant like potential for like upsets. And I know for sure we'll probably talk about this later. And for fans at least, like fans can probably consist of many students, alumni, or other like general fans that are enjoy backing their teams or enjoy backing certain players or prospects that are being scouted towards the NBA. And definitely March Madness will cause a big shift in school culture because everyone's just backing their team. Everyone wants their team to win. And I know if their team wins, you guys, the college, that team, some of those players get a lot of publicity.
Yeah, just to add on, the publicity part. I know that like even if you don't go all the way, if you're like an underdog school and you pull off a big upset, you're gonna get a lot of publicity too. I think that's why it's called March Madness. It's crazy because every single year there's going to be upsets. It's basically guaranteed. Is I don't know. It's just college basketball is so unpredictable. This year we saw Kentucky losing to Oakland in the first round, and this guy on Oakland, Jack Goki. He's like he scored I don't know like 30 points, 10 threes, and I immediately saw like after they won the game, he started getting NIL deals like right away for different brands. So I think being able to participate in this tournament is huge for especially for the smaller schools that maybe like ranked lower, just because you get an opportunity to kind of perform on the biggest stage and for not only like NBA teams to potentially see, but like for these companies to see your deals and whatnot. So I think March Madness is like a huge deal, and I'm not 100% sure like how like schools like the technicalities of how you qualify for the tournament in the first place, but I think yeah, teams should be striving to like get into this round of 64 March Madness tournament and see what happens from there.
Yeah, and being someone who doesn't really follow the March Madness college basketball scene, I really want to like say that, some of uh like it's a really big publicity stunt. Like I feel like a lot of, people are putting money into the tournament, and there's also a lot of underdogs beating, the top teams like every single year. I feel like the past few years, Purdue, who was consistently ranked like in the top three, I think, would always get upset, except for this year. So, but I feel like college basketball is kind of, something that's really unpredictable because upsets happen all the time. And I don't think that really happens in a lot of other sports, especially in professional sports leagues in the US.
Yeah, definitely. And I think like the upset part of things is like why it's so interesting. Like if we just went by seeding, like that was like obvious, like the number one seed won every single year. Like I don't think it would be even like half as popular as it is now. And just like the fact that there are so many upsets and like it's so unpredictable. I think that's definitely a big part of why people are still so encaptured by it. Um, and then Ivan kind of answered my next question, but like, do you guys watch college basketball yourself? And if you do, how are your brackets going? Or if you don't have a bracket, like, are the teams you thought would win winning?
Yeah, I can start us off. It depends on year to year. I sometimes watch March Madness, I sometimes don't. And over the past few years, I've been supporting Virginia because of legacy, my parents' legacy. So they would always give me a lot of UVA like props to cheer for. But yeah, UVA has been pretty successful in the past. They won a championship back in 2019, but since then have kind of struggled. Like they were facing Colorado this year for like a play-in game to the March Madness tournament, which they lost, so they're not in this tournament. And they're I can't watch them now, but I didn't make a bracket, and but I know a lot of people are predicting UConn and Purdue and Houston to do very well. Those are the top choices that I've seen, but obviously we know that Houston has been knocked out, and UConn and Purdue are still well within the competition. UNC, which is the other number one seed that everyone was hyping up, was also knocked out by Alabama. I personally think, just like what Ivan said, I know Purdue has been like top ranked and pretty much upset every other year except this year, and I think this is the year for Purdue to win. And I think this is like the vengeance for becoming the second number one seed last year to lose to a 16 seed, which was last year, which was Fairleigh Dickinson. I know a lot of my friends have heated debates over who's going to win March Madness, and a lot of them have predicted Houston or UConn after like their strong regular seasons, but I'm personally rocking with Purdue.
Yeah, I actually made a bracket and nope, it's not going well. Me and my friends, we did like a $5 like buy-in with the $200 pot, but out of like 50 people, I'm like 35th, so it's looking rough. I don't know. I thought Kentucky would be in the championship and they lost first round. And yeah, I mean, that's just like the thing, I guess, with the brackets. I think like Jack mentioned already, I think the reason why like it's fun to make these brackets is because we know like the number one seed isn't gonna win like nearly like not that much at all. So you gotta like you definitely gotta pick upsets that you think are gonna happen. But I have UConn winning it all still. I think especially after last night, they went on like a 30-0 run in the middle of the game. So I don't know. I like UConn.
Contrary to popular belief, I would have to go with Duke with the TikTok GOAT, Jared McCain. And the only reason is because from the various short film forms of media on Duke's basketball, I feel like they have a lot of potential and they're carrying a lot of momentum. So yeah, that is my logic behind picking Duke.
I'd like to interject here. I think Duke has good potential to win next year. They've been recruiting a lot for the 2024 class from high school. They're doing really well. And I'm not sure about this year, but I think Duke can go all the way next year, and I think Ivan would still support them.
Um, I actually agree with Kevin. I for one of my classes, like the whole point of the class is to like statistically predict like which team is gonna win, and like obviously like it's not going well for a lot of us because like upsets. The Kentucky game had a lot of us in shambles. But I think like that's like a really fun project, and again, like it's not going well for us. We had like I think it just like was not a good run. But personally, I still think that UConn is gonna win. And then also like one point I wanted to bring up today was like when Ivan was like, "Oh yeah, like like Duke's like is TikTok superstar." I just think that's funny because like online I keep seeing like people say like, "Oh, this person's about like 2 hours, like hours and hours on their bracket just to get beat by someone who is just like randomly picking teams." And so I just think that's funny if Duke does end up winning. Okay, so moving on, a comparison between college leagues and professional leagues. So for football, NFL obviously is pretty dominant over college football in most popularity measures. Not to say that college football isn't popular, but for basketball, one key measure shows that 18.1 million people tuned in to the 2023 college basketball championship game compared to the 16.8 million people, which is a peak, who tuned in for the 2022 NBA finals. So maybe from the statistic that we can see college basketball is, if not more, at least equally as popular as NBA. And like, what do you guys think of this? Like why it might be like comparable in terms of popularity, and then what are you guys more personally a fan of?
For me, I'm personally more of a fan of the NBA, and I definitely watch more of the NBA over March Madness. I feel like the NBA has more potential for like really like highlight reel plays, like a lot of cool dunks and stuff like that. Especially shout out Anthony Edwards this year, had a really big dunk this year, but that doesn't take away anything away from college basketball March Madness. And as Jackie mentioned, is starting to become a little bit more popular in terms of viewership. And I feel like this is because like March Madness is like I feel like it's been so embedded into like just the culture of like I guess like even like college life or just American culture in general. Like a lot of like participating schools and alumni, they like to tune in to March Madness to support their team, and it's just like it just rings around pretty much everywhere in like college. Like this year, Yale from the Ivy League made March Madness, and they made a ton of Instagram posts and like stories after like they were beating Auburn. They like hyped up their team, but then they lost the next round. I don't remember what team they lost to, but and then that the amount of posts that each like school, like example Yale, that the amount of like posts and stories that were being made definitely like I feel like demonstrates like the commitment of school like culture to like the tournament. And this is like similar to why NFL is like super popular in America, because like NFL is associated with a lot of like Thanksgiving traditions, Christmas traditions, or other like a lot of cultural things that have been going on for like a lot of generations. And also just like going back to what I said earlier and what Kaiman has probably built off of, like the upset potential has like really made March Madness fun, and it has attracted a lot of viewers to like just watch the entire like tournament after those upsets, seeing if those underdog stories will prove successful. They haven't proved to like, especially for those like really big underdogs, they have been able to go that far, but it's still I feel like it is still fun to watch the tournament play out after those like big upsets, and I definitely feel that others feel the same way. So that's probably also like something that contributes to the high viewership of March Madness and the college basketball final as compared to the NBA. I feel like, and the upsets are definitely more fun in March Madness because the NBA is 82 games, and most teams play each other more than once. So like and then like the upsets aren't like as fun. And then that structure of like how the competition works definitely is like provides like more fun of upsets towards March Madness, and I think that provides more excitement to like people who aren't like big basketball fans. So that definitely contributes to viewership.
Yeah, just to go off Jack's last point, I think especially during March, like during March Madness, I think college basketball might be they might be even more popular than the NBA, especially for like the championship game, with it just being like one game compared to the NBA finals with which is like a series at least 4 games, most often like 5 or 6. So it's like I feel like that definitely plays a role. But I still think like NBA basketball is probably the better product. I think especially because of the like predictability of college basketball. Like that's fun in a way, but like to in terms of watching it, I think you prefer to watch like an NBA basketball game. It's just more oftentimes more competitive, and yeah. So I do think that like I don't think NBA like is struggling in terms of viewership, but like also I think NFL will always be like the more dominant sport or league in America just because of the history that the NFL has compared to the NBA. It's always going to football is always going to be America's sport. So in terms of that, I do think that NFL will always kind of have that edge on the NBA in terms of why the viewerships are so different for these two sports in comparison to like the college version.
Yeah, and I just wanted to, I don't know if it's true or not, so maybe you guys can correct me, but I feel like a lot of the, college basketball stars would declare for the NBA draft after only like 1 year playing college basketball. When you, but in comparison, I would say in for football, college football, they would usually play throughout all college and then declare for the draft after their college careers. So I feel like that definitely plays a role because like I especially with like Duke or like UNC, all these like top tier basketball programs. I feel like they're renewing their rosters every other year because of how many people just declare for the draft and just leave the college basketball scene and go to NBA. But so I feel like for college basketball, especially, there's a lot more, commitment to the team because the players are constantly changing. So you're gonna have to like the team instead of the players, as opposed to NBA where a lot of fans will stick to the players rather than the teams. And I don't think it's the case for the NFL because like college football, I think it's like football is just like a very American college thing. So I think it's like kind of more of a tradition rather than something like basketball, which is you're actually watching because it's like as I think everyone had said, like there's a lot of upsets, right? You have one game, like one mistake, and then your one seed is gonna fall to a 16 seed, right? So I feel like that kind of aspect kind of boosts that viewership because the people are in there for watching the game for their teams rather than for individual players. And I also feel like college basketball is more focused on like teamwork rather than individual superstars like the NBA. So I think that also kind of contributes to that.
Yeah, definitely. And then about like Ivan's point on like the ages of which like going into the draft, like I think that's a funny comparison because like with um what's it called football, like sometimes you see like college students like waiting another year, like redshirting like before actually going into the NFL, which I just think is like an interesting comparison. Um, but yeah, so I think there definitely is like a really like, big like culture thing between like college football and then like NFL versus like NBA versus like the college version of basketball. Um, and also I think like because Madness like it itself is like so like I guess hyped up. So like that is just like I guess that's like wow, it's also so popular because like this entire month, like you go into like Elite Eight, Final Four, etc. Like that's like what leads into like the statistic of like the final like championship game. So it's like a whole, I guess, like it just like leads up to it and it just creates a lot of like hype for it. And personally, I feel like a lot of my friends, like even who aren't like really into basketball, like they'll always just like watch like the last one or like they'll say it on it line. Okay, so shifting topics a little bit. So women's basketball. I guess first of all, before like we dive into like the actual topics, do you guys keep up with it or hear about it online? And like I guess what have you heard?
I definitely have heard it more this year than any other year, and also last year it's been growing in prominence. I think in general we've definitely seen that women's college basketball has been like growing in prominence, even though I still don't know that much about it because I don't watch women's basketball. I don't watch too much men's basketball either. But I know we're going to talk about this later, but Caitlin Clark's emergence has definitely impacted the women's game, and it has definitely attracted a lot more viewers. And because of players like her, the league and those like tournaments as a whole have become a lot more competitive, and that is why it's gaining so much more prominence. And it is possible that it'll keep growing in prominence in the future.
Yeah, I think the media's this year especially, they're doing like a better job of pushing out like women's basketball like content on social media and stuff. Especially like focusing, I guess, putting that spotlight on stars like Caitlin Clark and like Angel Reese and whatnot. So I think because we're gonna talk about this later, but I think because of like this these players that are doing so well, I think they're more willing to push this out to the media and like on social media. I don't know if you guys see this, but like on like women's basketball comments, people like are pretty negative in the comments. Like we don't care about this and stuff like that. But I think over the past year, I think more and more people are kind of starting to see like that there are really good women hoopers as well. So that they're more like the comments are more negative, especially I mean are more positive now, especially with like Caitlin Clark and the growth like continued growth of women's basketball.
Yeah, I would definitely agree. And I feel like I would never see positive comments on social media about women's basketball until like maybe 1 year ago or 2 years ago when Caitlin Clark started going on the scene. I feel like now I see more comments like, "Oh, Caitlin Clark is definitely gonna make the WNBA worth watching now," right? And then it like, "Oh, if I ever have a daughter, it's Project Caitlin Clark," right? So, I feel like there's I think a lot of positivity going into women's basketball, but there's definitely still a lot of room to grow. I feel like I think it's all the focus is on like one or two players in the entire women's college basketball, right? And then, but I feel like there's like one or two plays out there. Like I feel like this, I think this one player from the USC team who had like 60 points or something, like a really large amount of numbers, and then everyone was going crazy, right? And I feel like I think there's a lot more positivity going into the sport, which is definitely really good for future of college women's basketball, but also the WNBA, because these players are inevitably going to join that organization.
Yeah, so that kind of brings me into my next point. So Fox Sports has said that women's college basketball is now averaging a bigger audience than men's college basketball on Fox. So around 981,000 views versus 946,000 views. So this actually like really surprised me when I saw the statistic, because like you said, before this year and maybe even like last year a little bit, all the comments on Instagram and like just social media as a whole is very like negative towards WNBA and like just women's basketball in college as well. So when I saw that statistic, I was always like, oh wow, interesting. And women's college basketball is up 48% on Fox and then up 60% across all like national networks. And one of the reasons of quite a few is probably this star power of Caitlin Clark in Iowa, and also like I would mention Angel Reese in LSU. So I guess like these rivalries, and then also looking at like the superstars in women's college basketball. Do you think after these players leave college basketball, will this popularity be sustained? Is there like a certain like marketing thing associated with the person instead of the team, or like how do you think that's gonna go?
Yeah, I've seen a lot of like marketing trends that relate closely to like a player and their success. Like Caitlin Clark has a lot of deals, a lot of marketing deals, and are representing a lot of different organizations and businesses that are trying to like push their products out, especially businesses that like are revolve more around sports and athletics. And I do think that the women's college basketball will lose a little bit of popularity, but it won't like lose, but it will definitely be more popular than it was prior to Caitlin Clark's like emergence. I think in general the women's like games have become significantly more competitive and enjoyable, just like the men's games. And that obviously has attracted a lot of attention from fans in general, like basketball enjoyers. But I think that because those like players are gonna end up in the WNBA or something like that, I feel like the popularity will also the I guess like a little bit like short decline of popularity in college, like women's college basketball will be made up by the growth and popularity of the WNBA, because those players are still going to be playing basketball. They're still going to be playing at a national level. They're still going to be super marketable. And I think if Caitlin Clark and the other superstars go to the WNBA, declare for the draft there, they're going to be, I think the WNBA is going to grow a lot. And this is exactly what Ivan said before.
Yeah, I think it's kind of hard to keep that sustained level of interest in women's college basketball if there isn't going to be like that kind of star power that's still there. So I think like with Caitlin Clark, she's declaring for the draft next year, and then Angel Reese and the USC player that Ivan mentioned, I think her name is like Juju. Um, they're all like, I'm pretty sure they're all going to the WNBA. So there needs to be, I haven't heard of any like younger like women's college players that are like super good. I guess the media hasn't really like put the spotlight on them yet, but I feel like there's definitely going to be other players that are going to kind of like rise up. And with this like new wave of interest in women's basketball, I do think that it isn't like a thing where like Caitlin Clark leaves and there's going to be immediately a lot of less viewers. There might be like a small decline just because people that are watching just for Caitlin Clark. But I think that the way that they set it up is pretty good, in that they got more interest in women's basketball as a whole. So I do feel like over the next couple of years there is going to be growth in terms of viewership for women's college basketball.
Yeah, and I would say I think I want to draw a comparison to college men's basketball, because I feel like, as I said before, a lot of the star players declare for NBA draft after like only a year or two in college basketball. And I think a lot of the focus on the men's side is on those players who aren't like professional level, but they're doing extraordinary things against good teams. Like I feel like there's one player who only shot threes the entire college basketball season, and he's like on his fifth year or something, right? So I think the focus for the men's is like very different because a lot of these star players are going to be gone after a year or two. Right? So they're focusing on these players who are just like ordinary bros who are a little bit above average in athletics, but aren't going to make the league, right? But I feel like that is a different marketing strategy for men's rather than women's, because for women's right now, it's like a scene where if you're good enough, you're gonna go to the league because I think it's a very growing field, and the league will want more players to later expand to more teams, right? So like after Caitlin Clark and all these really good female basketball players leave the college basketball scene, the media has to change its way of marketing these things because it's not the same as men's basketball because that's already a pipeline there. But for women, they'll have to do something different in social media because all of these players are going to go to the WNBA. It's just how well they can market them and be like, oh, the next Caitlin Clark. So I think it's all up to how the media decides on what will happen and how they will like show different players rather than on like Caitlin Clark leaving the college and then everybody just stops watching. I feel like it's just how the NCAA and how the media portrays the scene, really.
I also really agree with that point of like how a lot of it is dependent on the media. And if there's gonna be like, oh, the next Caitlin Clark, like the new Angel Reese versus Caitlin, like kind of thing going on. But I think also there's a sense of like even as like an audience, like I think like a lot of people, yes, like while like these star players like made the popularity rise, like they're not like the only reason. I guess like it kind of also like hooks people on. Like I know like a lot of people like they're not only watching for that one person. Like it's like they're like actually starting to enjoy college basketball for women's. It's not just like for this one person. And so I think like some people will continue watching, and then I think it's also like kind of natural to like seek out who like this next like Caitlin Clark is going to be. I think there's always like, oh, like the next like Tom Brady and like the NFL, right? There's always like that continuation of like the fan bases being like, oh, like we need to find the next whoever this great person was. And so I think it's going to be really interesting to see like who that like replacement person is, because I think it's almost like inevitable a little bit, because it's just like this like you want to like have that person. I'm just curious to see like if the person is like someone who's like good, but like not like Caitlin Clark level good, or like how like that develops. But I definitely do think that like yes, it might like lose a little bit of popularity, but as a whole, like even her just being in like this women's league for like college is like really good for their popularity, like even after she leaves. Okay, so switching topic again. For some, I guess like a little interesting fun fact. In 2014, Warren Buffett created a challenge for his Berkshire Hathaway employees. Whoever could correctly predict the outcome of all 67 games of March Madness would win $1 billion. As expected, no one won. And as we've mentioned on this podcast before, sports betting is a huge part of the industry. So how do you think this role plays with college basketball? And then also with that, just a little quick thing too, like as I mentioned before with like my own sports stat class where we're trying to predict statistically like which team wins, it's like really hard to do because we have like a lot of different models and like a lot of it is like computer AI generated, etc. But like they've all been incredibly incorrect. And I think there's like statistics out there, like a few, I don't know, I think I saw this a while ago. But like very, very few people's brackets actually like still like was correct until that point. And like we're like there's still games going on. And it kind of just goes to show like sometimes even like the most random things, like I saw someone saying like they won, like they were having like a little game of like whose bracket is best within like their group of friends, and then this girl like she literally just like picked whichever like mascot was the best, which I think is a great way, and she ended up winning. And so it's just very like random, and it's just like really hard to predict. So again, going back to the question, in sports betting and like the huge part of the industry, what do you guys think about this?
Yeah, just going off of Jackie's point, I wouldn't say it is just very hard. I'd say it's almost impossible because the outcome of all like 67 games in March Madness having a perfect bracket, upsets can happen at any time, and like, and it might be like one year that there's not as many upsets as the others, but still like your bracket's gonna be like screwed by like those upsets. Like even on the first day of March Madness, already almost like 90% of the brackets were not perfect in some way or another. Um, Largely due to part to that Oakland v Kentucky game. But there's obviously a lot of upsets that are otherwise like notable that I didn't like mention like before. Even like closer games like Houston versus Duke, like we obviously know Houston had a really strong regular season showing. They're seeded one, and even that game was like hard to predict because most people were thinking Houston were going to go all the way to the Final Four, but obviously they're knocked out right now because Duke beat them. And I feel like just this growth of like sports and just like sports betting has definitely also like translated to like the college basketball scene. And like I feel like that was natural because like the sports betting was like so popular in like football and like NBA and NFL. And obviously it was going to transfer over to like college basketball when there's like a lot of more upsets going on. So I feel like some fans are starting to predict which teams are going to be the teams that pull off the upsets and place bets on them, and that gets like really interesting. And just the upset culture and like the occurrences of upsets in March Madness has definitely like attracted a lot of like sports, like I guess like sports bettors to like place bets on like those like smaller schools to pull off an upset. And just due to the unpredictability and I guess so-called randomness of the results of March Madness, I think sports betting is like also like would also be like very like suitable and like popular there just because of like we never know who's like gonna win basically.
Yeah, I think college like sports betting has been kind of growing, but I know there's been like states that are trying to shut it down just because these are like college kids and you're like betting on their player like how many points they score and stuff like that. And they're talking about how it's like just like not hasn't been good for these college players because I know like NBA players, there's been investigation on this guy called Jontay Porter. He plays for the Raptors about how he's like fixing his own like stats, like he's purposely going under his line that these sports books are setting to make money. It's just like it's crazy that like NBA players would be doing something like that. Like you're not playing basketball to play basketball. You're playing like you're setting yourself up to make money to beat a sports book. So I do think that like sports betting is more prominent is getting more prominent in college. And yeah, I mean like Jack mentioned already, with like the amount of upsets that there is in March Madness, there's like so many different ways to bet though. You can like term like bet like based on which team's winning. There's like spreads as well, so it's just like I feel like college, if they get rid of like the player props in terms of like letting you bet on like if a player is going over or under a thing, there's definitely still going to keep like based on like team totals and who's you can bet on like which teams are going to win and whatnot.
Well, I was actually gonna say like there was I think there's less of a focus on betting over or under on a player in college than NBA. Simply because I feel like college basketball is very different compared to NBA basketball. Like there's only two halves and there's like different times and like it's like a bunch of rules that are different from college to basketball to NBA, but as when you compare to like maybe college football to NFL football, right? So I feel like there's so many differences that the betting is also different. Like the play styles of each team is different. Like each play styles of each player is different, really. But uh, and I would say a lot of these sports betting stuff, I think is more concerned towards like my perfect bracket rather than each player's performance because of this fact. And also, I feel like there are too many college teams to follow. So like you can follow a team, but they might not even make March Madness, right? So and there's too many teams, so I think that is why a lot of the people's brackets don't make it past the first round is because like this 16 seed, you don't know how well they play because you haven't watched any of their games, and you're like, oh, they're definitely gonna lose to the number one seed, but they beat them because it's so unpredictable, right? So I feel like that's also a contributing factor towards sports betting is because like you're not following each player, not following each team as compared to NBA. Like for NBA, you're gonna be like, oh, this specific player had this specific stat line. But in college basketball, you'd be like, oh, this player did really good in this game. Maybe I should look into a team, right? So I think it's just two complete different mindsets. But also, I know that may sound like a joke, but I've saw on social media that in college basketball, like the home team usually kind of like home team usually does something to put the game in their favor. Like I was seeing this video on how some teams would pump up the balls too much, and that changes the balls enough to make the away team score significantly less. Like there'll be video evidence saying like the ball's bouncing off the rim really weird, and people always like shooting the ball too far, which is because of the pump the balls, it causes them to shoot too far. So I feel like, there's a lot of other very small factors other are adding to this unpredictability of college basketball that makes people want to bet even more.
Definitely. Thank you guys all so much for tuning in on another episode of the Tunes for Business podcast. We'll see you next time.